So, before I continue with this review, I do want to give a little bit of a PSA about my audio. I'm filming on my phone camera. The audio is going to turn out how it's going to turn out. I literally cannot fix it at this present time because I have not configured anything to work to my advantage as of yet. Because I haven't had time, because I have this thing called a life, where I go to this thing called a job and work for 8 hours a day and come home and do this thing called eat and sleep and rest and also read so I can give you guys these lovely books. Sometimes I also like to write. Please do not comment on the audio. Please, 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 please. I cannot help it. So be silent. Silence. Like, you literally cannot stand the audio that much. Just don't watch my videos. If it just bugs you that much, go do something else. I really don't understand why you people honestly don't think that, judging by the quality of my videos, especially if you've seen my videos, at least several of my videos at this point, I don't put that much effort into them. I just blog, or vlog, or whatever the heck it's called. I give reviews. They're uncut. They're unedited. And again, I'm using a phone camera, and while this camera has a relatively good picture, it's of course not the best in the world. Anyway, on to the actual review now. I have finished reading Silent Mermaid by Brittany Fichter. She is an independent author who writes a lot of fairy tale fiction, and honestly, I don't run into a lot of Little Mermaid retellings. They're kind of hard to do, honestly. Or let me rephrase it. They're easy to do, hard to do well. Because The Little Mermaid is a very interesting plot. Because you have, on the one hand, you have the Disney version, and on the other hand, you have the real life version. Both can be kind of dark, but the Disney version has a pretty happy ending. The fairy tale version does not. And if you're going to write, for the most part, people who do do a retelling for The Little Mermaid, they either have to choose one or the other. It's very difficult to mesh the two very well, unless you do this thing called take an element here, take an element there, take an element there, and mesh it together and weave it together in your own story. And that's what Brittany Fichter, I feel, does very well. She introduces me to a lot of fairy tales that I honestly, didn't know anything about, the fairy tale that she was speaking or that she was referencing in her second book, of the Becoming Beauty trilogy. It's late. Like I said, I'm tired. Anyway, Blinding Beauty, yes. In Blinding Beauty, I knew something of the tale of, the Snow Queen, and while I suspected she was using elements of the Snow Queen in there, I also suspected that she was using a different fairy tale, because I do know that there's the Snow Queen, and then there's, a few other branching fairy tales that are related to the Snow Queen's theme, but are completely different. So I still, to this day, am not even quite sure which one she used, because you could probably use all of them, or say it was all of them, and that they were all basically together, but I don't think so. I think there's something in there I don't quite remember, let me rephrase that, I'm not quite sure. So Brittany, if you can tell me which one that was, because I literally cannot figure out which fairy tale you were using, because I'm either blind, deaf, or I'm weird and I just can't or I don't have the fairy tale in my fairy tale collection that's in my extra bookcase. Anyway, but yeah, no, so she does a very good job of weaving elements of fairy tales into her own story. And that's what happened here, because you have, let me put it this way, in both the Disney version of Little Mermaid and the fairy tale, you have the Sea Witch. She takes a completely different turn with the Sea Witch that, like, I found completely unexpected, and I was very pleasantly surprised with, like, with how I felt reading the story. It really, it bugged me, like, what Ariana, that's our Little Mermaid, that AKA Ariel, let's just put it that way, AKA Ariel. It really bugged me the way what Ariana had to go through, just because of the Sea Witch, and like their mutual past just also bugged me, because it was just like, oh my gosh, that's just like, how do you do that? And anybody who reads Silent Mermaid won't understand exactly what I'm speaking of. I did like the idea of dual natures. That's playing on um, just kind of how humanity in itself is dual natured. We are good and we are evil, and there's always going to be something that needs to balance that. Um, we have dual talents. We have things that we are both. Some of us are like, that we always have dual. I like the idea of dual that's brought forth into this story, and how dual should be meshed. Again, she also takes characters with disabilities and puts them into her story. Ariana has a disability, or a disability that is seen, a disability according to the mermaids. It's not so much of, or the mer people, I should say. It's not so much of a disability when she goes into the human realm, because as Ariel found out, like even in the Disney version, Ariel discovered that she can communicate relatively successfully by just, emoting, like being more expressive with herself. And I did like just kind of how, because um, Ariana had to, like, I mean, she couldn't sing, she couldn't speak, and if you can't speak, that's basically the point of the story, is Ariana finding her voice. Like, part of that is finding her voice. Like, that's part of the plot line, and it's very like that. It's probably the main plot line, I should say. Everything else has a subplot. Even the battle between good and evil is a subplot. But anyway, just like Ariana finding her voice, she just she has to learn to live with it, and she has learned to live with it like her entire life. And so she has to communicate in different ways. And one of the ways that she can't, like, that's taken away from her, um, when she goes to the human realm, is writing on paper, because the love interest, Michael, he's a prince. His entire kingdom is basically, like, they're starving. They're starving. There's subplot number one. His kingdom is starving, and they can't afford paper, and so she can't use the paper to communicate, because it's just not available to her. And she gets into serious trouble when she did use it eventually, for a different reason than trying to communicate, but she got in serious trouble for doing that. And so it's very interesting just to see that progression of character in there, as like she struggles with the disability, but also finds that, and again, in the human realm, it's not so much of a disability, because again, for them, they don't look down on it so much, as they are, as humans, wonderful humans, are more concerned about appearance. And you can be, and again, there is truth to the saying, excuse me, that's in the Bible, by the way, that the silent fool shall be thought wise. That's definitely, I think, a bit of a undertone, a very, like, you can kind of tell it if you really read it, undertone, or if you're paying attention, undertone, but it's in there, because we humans, we are very visually oriented. And the mer people are not. They're very audibly oriented. If you sound, it's all about you sounding good, versus in the human realm, it's all about you looking good. Now, in our world, it's both. You have to sound good and you have to look good and you have to learn how to mesh the two. And it's very interesting how, like, even Renata is the antagonist. She's the sea witch. She sounds good. She even looks good. And they bring up that up a lot. There's actually an element from the Disney version that is brought into that one as a plot point to help get the more serious aspect of the plot rolling. Um, and that like it's kind of a cascading effect. It's very interesting. It's like a wave almost. Like the beginning is the start of the wave, and then there's the climax, and then there's the end where it just splashes. And I kind of like how reading that story made me feel like I was reading a wave. That was really cool too. I don't know if Brittany Fichter intended to do that, but if you're writing about, I feel like if you're writing about the sea, it's gonna happen anyway. Or at least I wouldn't be surprised if that would happen. It would also just, if you're in that mindset, like mentally, if you're in that mindset, you could probably write something that write a plot line or several plot lines that end up feeling like a wave. And so, but yeah, no, she does a lot of really good things in this um, retelling of the Beauty and I'm really tired of the Silent Mermaid, the Little Mermaid, that I really enjoyed. And she has her Cinderella one out, and I'm looking forward to reading that one and also giving y'all a review. I am going to reread Beauty Beheld and give y'all a review of that one eventually. I'm not there yet. I have a lot of other reading commitments to do. So anyway, there's that one. Star rating, I give this one a 5 out of 5 stars for really flawless execution, in my personal opinion. I really enjoyed it. There were a couple of typos here and there. Like, not even like typos, just sort of like words that I felt like probably could have been cleaned up a little bit, but I mean, when you're an independent author, you can only, probably only afford like one editor. And then, of course, there's us silly little readers, hopefully relaying everything correctly to you, which honestly may or may not be easy. Probably not, honestly. Sometimes we're right, sometimes we're wrong, and sometimes we miss things too. And so, editors will miss things, especially if you only have one or two. The readers will miss things because not everybody is an English major. And again, people miss things. So, I mean, I feel like this is definitely a very flawless, I don't know, fifth book now? Yes, it's your fifth book. It's her fifth book, yes. And this is a very flawless fifth book that she has come out with, and I really can't wait to read more of her fairy tale kingdom, and I can't wait to see what else she has in store for us. So, good night, everybody. With that, I'm going to go to bed. And again, remember, referring right back to the PSA, if you guys don't like the audio, I can't help it. I can't fix it. I do not have the equipment set up or even ready to be adapted yet to be fixed. So calm down and just learn to live with it. And if you can't learn to live with it, just go watch somebody else who can afford the equipment and apparently doesn't have a life other than YouTube. See ya.